Beatrice Elachi, Speaker, County Assembly of Nairobi, and Richard Onyonka, MP, Kitutu Chache South. That's my panel for the news review this morning. The biggest headline today has to do with the passing on of Kenneth Matiba, a hero, one of the many heroes of Kenya's second liberation, the fight for multi-party democracy. And we're just sharing the fact that, yes, he is on the headlines, both dailies today, but the fact that a 28-year-old today could know very little about Kenneth Matiba. And a 28-year-old, I'm made to understand, we have politicians in parliament around that age. A Kenyan politician aged 28 years old may not necessarily know exactly who Kenneth Matiba was or is, because not much is written about him. But the caliber of politicians we have on the panel this morning definitely know who Kenneth Matiba was, and I'd like to give each an opportunity to probably send a message of condolence to the family and just remind Kenyans, or try to paint a picture of who exactly Kenneth Matiba was to this country, why he's that important, and he has to occupy the front pages of the dailies this morning. Let's start with you, Bwana Dan Manso.
Yes, first and foremost, condolences to the family and many Kenyans who knew the Honorable Matiba. At least I have an idea. You know, as you remember, he is the father of opposition. He was a part of Multipartyism, people who brought Multipartyism in Kenya. And I do remember very well that he was a presidential candidate and in 1992, and gave President Moi quite a run, you know, in politics. And after that, you know, he was detained. There were many other issues around him. But most important is the young people to learn something out of the life of Matiba. And a lot of young people then supported his cause. And also in 2002, young people came out in large numbers to support change, to support a better country. And I think the legacy he leaves behind is quite a heavy one. And young people should learn that this country has a history, and that the future of Kenya is the role modeling young politicians are going through today by the older politicians. Okay.
Madam Speaker, of course, is a man of many talents. He served as chairman of Kenya Football Federation back in the 1970s. He's been in the cabinet, yes, as a cabinet minister. Some of this is just shared even on page 2 and 3 of the Standard this morning. A picture of him receiving a donation of footballs as KFF chairman back then. Of course, we know him as an opposition leader. He ran for president twice. He served also in the cabinet of President Moi. But how do you remember Matiba?
Well, first I'll remember him when we were students in the 90s. I think he is one of the icons that we remember during the multi-party democracy struggle. But more interestingly is in 1992, if they were just together with former President Mwai Kibaki, I think that time they would have removed Moi at that time, if they had to just stand together. But after that, I think there was a lot of, I mean, Moi just decided, now I am the politician, and you will realize I'm the politician. And from that time, I think things just went down and down. But one thing we have to ask ourselves as a country is, how do we document history for ourselves? You go to the United States, you find so many museums, and I'm hoping we can document. This is a man who brought in a party that the whole of Mourning, if I'm not wrong at that time, went into that party. And he brought in Mourning to realize that Mourning is one county that you have to watch in terms of when they have their stand. I believe Mheshimiwa Kangata, when you look at him, you look at the young Matibas coming up, who are very defiant, and when they say this, they say that. So we have role models that we can pick on, and who believe in him, who believe in his politics. But the other thing, I think, going forward, we have to also now ask ourselves, will we come here and celebrate when they are gone? I think there's a lot he needed from us, not just economic-wise, but I think also just family-wise, the way you feel you're still in one family. And this family of politicians tend to forget their colleagues when they find them in such scenarios. And it's something we have to ask.
Yes.
And I'm hoping that as we eulogize and celebrate his life, that we are not going to live again to eulogize another one. Go and look for him now.
Yes.
Let us look for Charles Rubia where he is. Let us get memoirs before he now goes down with the wealth that they are carrying.
Yes.
And it will really, really help the country to understand what the journey. You know, in this journey, it's like we only understand Jaramogi Odinga. And why? Because my former Prime Minister has made it his business to ensure the spirit of the father is remembered to date. You get. So let us remember all our heroes. Let us remember these are our fathers who believed that Kenya can grow to another level.
And the Standard has been fair to us. It's given us some of the highlights on page 3 of Matiba's life. He was one of the youngest Kenyans to be appointed permanent secretary at the age of 31.
Yeah.
31 years of age. That's back in 1963. Yes.
Whoa.
He was the first indigenous African permanent secretary for education. Wow. He was mentored by the great Carrie Francis, headmaster of Alliance High School. This is very interesting. At 31, serving at that level. Yeah, we just remember him for the struggle for Kenya's second liberation, but he has been in government for quite a long time. Very few Kenyans have actually had that kind of service to the nation through government positions. Bwana Onyonka.
Yeah, I would also like to pass my condolences to the family. I happen to be a little bit fortunate because Kenneth Matiba was in the same cabinet with my father. They worked together from the Kenyatta days and crossing over to the Moi days when Moi came in 1978. The reason why individuals like Ken Matiba have a history that is substantive was simply, one, because of education. Let's not forget that Kenneth Matiba was amongst the team of very young, smart, highly educated Kenyans who went to school in Makerere. In fact, he's amongst, other than the fact that we are always talking about former President Kibaki as having been the star from Makerere, Ken Matiba was actually from there. Then when they came in, or they came back into government, after graduating in Makerere and many other universities, there were also the group that went to America, which included Kina Obama's father and that kind of team. Matiba came back and they served the country. They had very high standards, moral and ethical standards to serve the country. And then another thing that many of us don't also remember off the cuff was that KBL was actually synonymous with Matiba, because after government, then he went to Kenya Breweries and he became the African managing director, carried on the brewery to its heights. At that time, it was one of the most successful companies that was doing business in Kenya. Then again, contrary to the typical interpretation of who would get into football. At that time, it was you had to come from Western Kenya. If you are not Jobo Mino, then you would have to be somebody from Western, you know. Matiba, again, got into football. And he ran KFF very successfully. If you look at the history on when KFF, Kenyan football was doing very well. The days after Kinajo Kadenge, the Ogolas group, they were very young, very talented, and extremely hard-working Kenyans who played football very well. So the guy had a checkered history of great things, great achievements. The other thing that somebody would have to look at is that the guy was very opinionated. If he took a position, he died with it. And you know, to resign from government in 1990, being a government minister, and then come up and say, I am going to resign my position, him with President Kibaki. Remember, it was really scary to former President Kibaki, who said it's very difficult to cut a mugumo tree with a razor blade. But Kina Matiba said, no, we are going to change this country. The only other issue I would raise, if you look, because we have to look at both sides now, is that one of the analysis made on his politics is that for the elections of 1992, the argument goes that hadn't he run, there is a possibility that Jaramogi would actually have become president of Kenya. But now by him running and Jaramogi running, the opposition was split right in the middle, and Moi again akapita katikati, and he still remained being president.
Yes.
Yes.
Interesting that even that kind of politics, it's still, we still experience that kind of, yes, with us today. The splitting of parties. Remember, one very strong political party was much younger than Ford, the Forum for Restoration of Democracy, which was the main political party, ended up splitting, becoming Ford Asili and Ford. Yes, the two-finger salute, that statement, let the people decide. These are some of the things I remember when Kenneth Matiba. Madam Speaker, you want to say something?
Yes, one thing also we need to remember about him is education. The Hillcrest schools, he was among the first to bring the British system in the country. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So
he was a businessman. He apparently even started his own airline after trying to export some produce, and the airlines that were available back then failed to do so, so the produce went bad, and he decided to start his own airline to be exporting his own produce abroad.
The other issue that I think that we needed to touch on that is really interesting, because at that time I was just getting into the University of Nairobi. The time that Matiba came in as a member of parliament, he defeated a Titanic. He defeated Dr. Kiano from Ranga. And you know, at that time, to defeat Dr. Kiano, you know, Dr. Kiano was the, I think it was, Dr. Kiano was the first person to have a PhD in Kenya. And he had come in, and Mzee Kenyatta had appointed him to the cabinet, and he was a person of very high standard. And Matiba basically took the bull by the horns, and it was, I remember being very, very young, and I would remember my father saying, I wouldn't wish to be at crosshairs with this man, because he had the resources, he had the capacity to speak to the public. He was somebody who was highly respected in his area, and indeed he defeated Kiano by, I think, a margin of about 2,000 votes, and that's when he came into the cabinet after, by that time, Moi appointed him. So the battles that were political in Central Province started at that time. Even though the competition they had was not really enmity, it was just test of nerves, test of capacity, and they would say, let the best man win.
Yes.
And at that time, Matiba was the best man.
Yes, I spoke to Bwana Charles Rubia earlier today on phone, and he was probably one of the closest colleagues of Kenneth Matiba, especially during that time, during the second liberation struggle. And he mentioned the fact that the politicians we have today, the younger politicians, not really seized of what kind of struggles they went through to ensure that you have the kind of space you have right now. As a member of parliament, he said that probably even the politicians are allowing us to go to actually regress into dictatorship. Do you think that probably your crop of politicians has let down this heroes of the second liberation?
Well, I don't think they have let them down, because at all material times when liberation was coming to the country, the young people were very useful. If you remember 1992 and 2002, you know, you can see the participation of youth, university students. A lot of them even had been sent out of university, and as a young lawyer, I was one of them who used to represent them in court, and for free, and they'll be back to university, and we are very happy President Kibaki you know, made sure that all students who had been sent away because of the struggle were back to school, including Hassan Omar, the Honorable Keter, and many others. And therefore, the young people have always been part of the struggle, but we should not allow new dictatorship. The old dictatorship is dealt with. They worked very hard. We should stay focused. We have role models in them, in Charles Rubia, in Kenneth Matiba, and even the Honorable Raila Odinga. There are many people who are role models to young people, and we should not let the dream die. Okay. We should make sure that multipartyism is a reality, and that we don't go into a situation whereby the politics are compromised, and it's like we are in a one-party system. That's why in Parliament, despite the handshake, some of us have said we are going to remain in opposition. We are going to check the government, and I can assure you, the Honourable Rubia, that we'll do our level best to make sure that the Constitution of Kenya is upheld. Yes.
There are those who criticize Jubilee, saying it's the folding of parties, merge of parties into one force. That probably is a step towards single party rule again. This is what they really fought against, that two-finger salute, ensuring that at least there are more than one party at one go.
Yes.
Do you think that probably
no, I think
we've lost the plot?
No, I think it is just us. I think it is you as, you know, when you look at them individually, these were very strong, as Mheshimiwa said, strong personalities that when they're in politics, when they say no, it is no. The problem we have is today I say no, tomorrow I'm in a yes. I mean, try and have, and that's you be who you are, build yourself, but when you're saying no because there is a purpose why you're saying no. I would want us to have such politics, and that the leaders will not bind me because I have said no. I mean,
where you really stand for something.
Yes. Yes. The only problem I have with our politics today, we don't stand for anything. So today I'm in yes, tomorrow I'll be no, then tomorrow I will come back to the yes. No. Or because my president has said this, now this is what has to be, and my opposition leader has said this, regardless of anything, I have to. There are very few you pick that can stand and say no. While I agree with this, but this one, we have wronged. You know, it's true. Just say it. Okay. Yeah. Tomorrow you will be remembered for saying.
Finally, in this matter, Bwana Richard Onyonka, do you think that, yes, your crop of leadership now, as you say, Bwana Kenneth Matiba was the age of your father. That's a different generation. Do you think you're staying true to the ideals that they fought for?
To be honest with you, Fred, the reality we face as young politicians and politicians who are now part of the Kenyan political fabric is that the standards are lower. I can tell you that. Our standards are much, much lower. We are not even clear and sure what the issues are. During the time of Matiba, Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, the issues were about multipartyism, the issues were about dividing the national cake, discussing the issues of bringing in the new constitution and devolving power and the resources. Remember, for close to 25 years, the issue was devolution. We need to remove money from the center, power from the center, so that it goes to the mashinani. Much hasn't changed. The very unfortunate scenario we have is that the impetus and the thinking which our senior politicians in the 60s and the 70s were fighting over, for many of us, because of our youth and because of a lack of that experience, we've not really been sure what the struggle has been all about. But in the 60s, the struggle was about the class. I mean, the issues about those who have not. In the 60s, issues of corruption were very strong. I mean, these are matters that integrity and national development were given first priority. In the 60s, the struggle for multipartyism had nothing to do with individuals. It was a simple aspect that Kenyans were saying, we need space, we need to articulate, we need to have freedom of expression, we need to engage each other freely and all that. Those were the ideals. In between, halfway through, mixed with a lot of things, those ideals don't exist anymore. Now, what exists is purely personal survival. And that personal survival is why you notice that we don't stand for any ideals. I mean, today I will stand up and say, former Prime Minister is the worst creature that the world, that God ever created. And yet the following day, if the Prime Minister does something what my party likes,
You will be singing
you
his
can
praises.
see everybody's now saying, oh, this is just like Jesus. I mean, the man is the greatest. And yet when you ask somebody, what is it that you are disagreeing with him about,
They're not clear.
that all of a sudden that is something you are agreeing with him after 1 week. So maybe it is what history is teaching us. Maybe it is the growth that Kenyans have to go through, so that with time we can then begin to stand for ideals which we believe in.
Wow.